If you're considering whether it's still a good idea to buy the Nikon D850, a camera that was released in September of 2017, coming up on 4 years ago now, in the year 2021, well, this thing still might be one of the greatest DSLR cameras ever made. For photography, that is. My name's Nicholas Johnson, and this is the Space Warehouse. When it comes to shooting video, while the Nikon D850 does shoot in croppless, full-frame 4K video with an exceptionally crisp 100 megabytes per second output, and it even has real-time face detection, the continuous autofocus in video mode is practically useless, because even if your subject is perfectly still, the autofocus still wants to hunt around every few seconds and just won't lock on to a subject, even one that's perfectly still, like a Canon or a Sony does. So for something like this very shot setup right here, unless you have someone to stand on the other side of the camera, set it up, hit record and walk away, it's a little cumbersome to record yourself as far as video, just because you got to get the focus just right in manual. But if you're getting it to shoot photos, this camera has no shortcomings at all. So the D850 has a 45 megapixel full frame sensor. And because of that, you can effectively apply like a 1.5 crop factor on a whim if you feel like it with the digital zoom in post, when compared to the more typical 20 or 24 megapixel sensors on most professional cameras. And what I mean by that is, if you have a crop sensor camera, if you zoom to 100 versus a full frame camera zooming to 100, the crop sensor is gonna be as if you had extra zoom on your lens. I am a professional motorsports photographer, and occasionally in the forums there's an argument about whether or not it's better to use something like the D500 so you can take advantage of the crop factor to reach further with the same lenses. But with this camera, the sensor has the same pixel density, even though the sensor's bigger. So you have the same pixels per inch on the sensor, it's just you have more sensor, more inches. It's almost as if there is a D500 within the D850. What I mean by that is, if you take the same picture with the D500 with the same lens and the same position as you take with the D850, even though this is a crop sensor and it will effectively reach further with the lens, because the resolution is so high with the D850, both pictures zoomed to 100% in Lightroom are going to be the same picture. It's going to give you the same reach while still having a full frame. In addition to the insane resolution, this camera has a native 64 ISO for super low noise and really good low light performance at -4 EV. I recognize that mirrorless cameras are the future, and that's going to be the way to go, and I'm sure that this will be the last DSLR camera that I ever own. Those new Sonys with their eyeball autofocus, and even the Z6, Z7s, that technology is incredible. But as long as the little black box in this viewfinder is where I intend it to be when I push the shutter, this thing just doesn't miss. This camera never misses. I mean, no camera never misses. This camera almost never misses. There just haven't been shots that I want to get that I can't get with the Nikon D850. The autofocus through the viewfinder is instantaneous. And when using back button continuous autofocus, it tracks and uses some fancy algorithm to pull focus exactly where a moving object is about to be. So if I'm rattling off photos of race cars that are coming at me at 150 miles per hour, if I want the grill to be in focus, the grill's gonna be in focus. And yes, mirrorless cameras have better software, better processors, and they do have some advantages, but there is no reason a person couldn't use this camera for professional work forever, as long as it works. I don't see a need for more than 45 megapixels moving into the future, even though things are probably going to get higher resolution. The batteries last an extremely long time. I've never kept track specifically of my own battery performance, but according to Nikon, you can get 1,840 pictures per charge. And with the optional battery grip, not only can you easily go to portrait mode because there's buttons and dials on it, but that extends that battery life to 3,300 photos on a charge. If you're taking more than 3,300 pictures in a day, then you have an extraordinary stamina for editing. It'll do automatic focus stacking for macro. It'll do automatic bracketing for HDR photos, automatic time-lapse movies without having to combine images in 4K and 8K. It connects to your phone with Wi-Fi, so you can use your phone screen to focus, take photos, and change settings. It's got dual card slots, whether that's for redundancy or mega capacity, the choice is yours. It's weather sealed and dust proof. Flick a lever and the buttons on the back are illuminated, so you can see what you're doing in total darkness. Maybe you're taking astrophotography. Nikon never changed their f-mount from the SLR days, and so f-mount lenses even from 40 years ago will still fit and work on this camera. And vice versa, in case you didn't know that. It's got an HDMI readout, so you can plug this thing into a monitor so that you can see what it sees. It has a tilty screen. It has a joystick, so you can move around your focus points really easily. This thing is just phenomenal. So if the question is, in 2021, is the D850 still a good buy? For photography, the answer is yes, absolutely yes. Once smarter features, bigger processors, and computational photography make their way into mirrorless cameras, DSLRs will quickly become a niche market for old dudes who just don't want to move into the future. But for some reason, nobody's even talking about that stuff yet, so this camera is still going to be relevant for years. And I'm not in any specific camera brand's camp. I use a Sony Alpha mirrorless camera mounted on a gimbal for most of the videos I make. I'm just so impressed by this camera and its ability to shoot photos. For video though, if you're rarely or literally never shooting photos, although the quality of the video that comes out of this is awesome, the continuous autofocus not working well is just too big of a setback. You should look into a Canon or a Sony camera. But if you primarily shoot photos and just occasionally need to take videos, the only time it's really going to be frustrating is if you're going to try to take a video of yourself by yourself, just because you don't want to use continuous autofocus. What I do when I do need to take, like if I use this as a B camera or something, I'll set it up on a tripod, connect it to my phone with Wi-Fi, hit the autofocus on my face, walk over to the camera, switch it to manual focus, start the video, come back, and blah, blah, blah. It's just a few extra steps, but then you do get really good video out of it. But if you move it all, it won't track the movement of your face. But using it to make B-roll video, it's really good. It's still, because the autofocus works awesome. It's just the continuous autofocus will hunt. And for some reason on the Nikon app, it's called SnapBridge, that connects your phone to your camera, they just left out a start video button. I don't know why. It makes no sense, but so it is. It's great for shooting B-roll though. Like I said at the beginning, it uses the full sensor. There's no crop on it. And I think it just super samples it down to 4K. So the actual picture quality is great. It's really great. It's just that the continuous autofocus system sucks on the video. On the photo, so through the viewfinder, the continuous autofocus is amazing. It never misses. So that's the Nikon D850. This is my main photo shooter until Nikon comes out with the next big mirrorless camera, probably. And actually, Nikon did just announce the development update for the Z9, so that officially exists. They didn't put out a lot of details. It's not officially going to be available till the fourth quarter of this year, which means you won't really be able to buy it until February of 2022, and that's probably going to be like a $6,500 camera because they're calling it a flagship. Looking at the details though, that thing's going to be pretty sweet. Nikon D850.